This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, my name is Novo and welcome to another session of the Technology Review Council. Today we're very pleased to have Robert and Alexis here from Olumo, and I had the pleasure of meeting both of them and having a demonstration. So I'm not going to spoil any surprises, but I'm going to say be prepared. It's a very different new way of really checking on people, getting some feedback, and maybe some interesting perspective. As always, I encourage you all to ask questions. I'll watch the chat box and so on. And Robert, Alexis, if you'd be kind enough to introduce yourselves, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Alexis, would you like to maybe lead us off?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Alexis Birdzis. I have the pleasure of being the Chief People Officer at Olumo. We are really striving and working towards creating a inclusive and healthy culture for our clients. And I then would like to thank Nav for giving us this opportunity to speak with all of you today. And again, if you have any questions, I will be monitoring the chat again with Nov. And that, with no further ado, I'd like to hand off the mic to our CEO, Robert Brown.
Thank you, Alexis. We're thrilled and excited to be sharing this as for your review in the Technology Council. I'm really interested and intrigued to hear your thoughts and comments. So yes, please, would love this to be as conversational as possible through the chat, and we'll be happy to answer questions as we go along. I'd rather answer questions and make sure that we help you understand what we're trying to communicate than just us here dumping it towards you. So I really appreciate that. You know, I think I'll start off with what our goal really is and what we're trying to accomplish. And that is, as organizations, if you look back a few years ago, it's funny, I did some pretty deep research into all of this, but organizations started, doing surveys clear back in the early 20s to start to understand what was going on in their organizations. And of course, in the late 90s is when kind of that human experience, and we started to see some studies that connected the workplace experience to the actual outcomes of the business performance within the organization. And we've kind of gone from what I say is employee satisfaction to then employee experience. And what we as a company are really helping organizations now try to do is make the next shift to understanding the human experience at work. What is that human experience? Well, there's a massive shift, and why do we need it, frankly? There's a massive shift, of course, in the workforce. As new age and demographics and millennials and Gen Zs and all of these are coming into the workforce, well, their perspective on what work should really be and the way that should go and the value sets and all of those different things, it's not like, back in the 20s when we worked in factories and all of that. And so there's a dramatic shift in organizations in order to remain relevant today are really having to transition their own mindsets and take a look from a different perspective. And that is the perspective of their employees. And they're having to create, just like, now employees are really shopping for the experience that they want. We're in an experience economy, and they're shopping for the organization that really aligns with their own personal value sets and what they're looking to accomplish. And so organizations are now having to shift. And I call it's really, to me, it's almost like you go from this focus. We focused really well over the last few years in understanding the experience that we give to our clients. Now we need to take that same level of focus and intent and focus it towards our own experience of what's the experience that our people are having within the organization. And that's what we're calling and terming as the human experience at work. What is that experience? Well, of course, your people look at it, and there was a recent study that showed that 92% of employees look at they describe it as their day-to-day experiences, all of those little micro experiences within the organization. So now if you're the organization trying to identify, well, which of those experiences matter most? Where do we need to focus our efforts? Well, that's what we're talking about. How do you now create that human experience at work? How do you create an environment that engages and attracts and retains the people within your organization? People are of course your greatest asset. So how do we create that? Well, to me, I've always found that there are three key components of solving any issue or any problem. And the first is you got to have really good data. You've got to understand the problem. You got to be able to define it. You have to know what contributes to it. All of those key components of getting good insight. Because once you have that, I think it was Steve Jobs that said, once you understand a problem, you're 95% of the way to fixing it. Well, that's exactly right. Now we can create that game plan. We can start taking and making intentional acts to address those issues once we really understand it. But then a common gap that I also see is that many organizations, once they take those actions, they don't really have a great way to measure the impact. Well, did the things that we decided to do, are they having the actual impact on the organization that we intended? So my big question is then when it comes to people and culture, how do you get the data that you actually need? Because the traditional methodology for this has been this process, this terrible process, frankly, in my mind, of gathering insights through one-off, one-time surveys. My personal belief is that surveys are very effective and old school. And that was really what we tried to identify. Well, how do we get the data? Because in a survey, I kind of identified 5 key issues of what are the real struggles with traditional surveys. And don't get me wrong, if you're looking to find out whether people want steak or chicken at the party, at the company party or something like that, then a survey works really well when you have a very definitive answer that you're looking for. But when it comes to your people and understanding your culture, that just doesn't get it done because they represent a single moment in time. We did a culture survey, we did a D&I survey, we did whatever, all kinds of different, we did a mental health survey. When we sent people home, we did a survey to see what their experience was. We gathered one-time insights. And now, 3-4 months later, that experience has changed, but we're still trying to drive off of that same thing. So I call it like, that rearward thinking, or I'm driving the vehicle out the rear view mirror 3, 6, 12 months at a time. The other is that frankly, most surveys get very, very low insight. I was actually talking with a consulting group the other day, and they were working with a very large organization, 500,000 employees. And they got, out of that 500,000, they got 2,000 responses to their engagement survey. It's pretty hard to drive what's really happening in the organization with such limited data. They're also one-sided, right? It's not a conversational approach. We're just one side. So of course, from my perspective, like my brother-in-law over the holidays, he was like, yeah, I couldn't even get my people to fill them out because they keep saying the same things and nothing ever changes. So anyways, there's a dramatic issue with the methodology of how we look to try to gather those. But as a CEO, my experience has always been that I have amazing data. I have dashboards, the language of business is numbers. And I have all kinds of numbers and data and insight when it comes to the financial aspect of the organization. So why, when I turn over to the HR teams and our people and culture, why is it crickets? Literally, maybe I have an ENPS score. Maybe I've got some lagging indicators like churn rates, but nothing that really tells me on a day-to-day live actionable insight about what's going on within the organization, what I need to know, and how to address that. And one of my favorite statements for organizations is that you cannot move the needle if you don't have a needle. If you do not have a way to quantify that experience, and I know that people say, well, you can't quantify culture, and I just call BS to that, because you can, and you can quantify all various aspects of that so that you can understand your people and culture. And then once you have a needle, now you know. So for example, if you're concerned about your people's mental health right now, and well, is that your biggest concern? Is diversity, equity, inclusion one of the biggest concerns that's going on within the organization? Is engagement, is well-being, is my remote work experience? Well, if you don't have a way to know and track that and measure it, quantify it, then you're actually taking steps within the organization. You're throwing darts at the board. And that's what we really looked for at Olumo. That, and I know this was a long story to get to this point, but that's what we do. That's why, as an organization, we created Olumo. Olumo is the first systematic approach to driving business results through real-time human analytics, literally giving you actionable daily insights from your organization. Well, so how do we do it? Well, we created a very simple and simplistic process that we call LEAP. Because of course we had to have an acronym, right? So we help organizations first to actively listen to their people, then engage in anonymous two-way conversations that lead to action, and then of course have the ability to measure progress of the steps and the actual things that we're working on within the organization. So how do we help people to listen? Well, one of the interesting things, and we can do it in a variety of ways. Yes, we can do it email, but of course that's my least effective approach, is if I have to do it email, I can. But frankly, a lot of organizations don't even have corporate emails for all of their people anyways. So what our goal was is, well, how do we meet them where they are? How do we make this such a frictionless, easy, simple experience for their people? Now we can connect through, if your organization uses Slack, great, let's use that. If you have, like, there's some where they clock in and out and we use time clock software or different ways. But one of our most effective has actually been by just sending a simple text, not even an app, but a simple text to each employee once a week to ask about the different experiences that they are having with your organization. Because our goal is not to deliver one-time insight, one-time feedback. In order to be able to quantify it and track it and measure the impact, we need to gather consistent insight. And this is where we're completely different than any other, you could think of us as not the survey platform, but the anti-survey platform, where we are a business tool to help drive organizations forward by giving them the most actionable daily insight that they've ever seen before. So what we do is, the way that we do it then is we ask questions, as I mentioned, once a week for each employee. Simple question. We ask 3 types of questions, and those questions come from helping to understand the entire experience. So that entire experience includes, yes, you may receive a question this week about your personal well-being. You may receive a question next week about the systems and the technologies that we're using, and are they sufficient? You may receive one the following week about your remote work experience if you're working remotely. All of these different things surrounding our primary categories. Well, then underneath those categories, for example, well-being, one of our categories is psychological safety. That's one of the 7 or 8 individual metrics that we identified to help us understand their personal well-being. Well, within psychological safety, I asked 3 questions, and I explain this to you so you can kind of get a sense of how the solution works. But I asked 3 types of questions. The first may be a scale-based, where, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your experience, possibly like with your manager or something like that? And in a matter of 2 or 3 seconds, boom, they send back a score. It was a 1, it was a 5, or something like that. Very simple. Well, those scale-based questions because we get such a fast response via primarily through text, but through whatever methodology, we get such a fast response that in literally in less than 24 hours, it lights up these dashboards and our heat maps. And what that does for the organization is across all of these different areas, now I'm able to, by team, by location, department, sort and quantify all this data. Well, I can immediately pick out that, for example, look, Department 55, they're really struggling with their new hire and onboarding processes, where Department 50 is crushing it. These guys are doing amazing. Well, these teams are struggling. All of these different areas, and what it does is literally that age-old question: what matters most? Where should I be focusing my efforts? What's going to have the biggest impact on our organization? Because we can't do everything, but what's going to have the biggest impact? We answer that immediately. Now the big question, though, becomes why, right? And one other note that I would say here is that for especially people in HR, one of the struggles that I see consistently, and I had a CHRO virtually in tears with me a couple of weeks ago, and she said to me, you've been able to do for me what I was never able to do within the organization. And I was like, oh, well, that's pretty awesome. What was that? And she said, raise the level of the importance within the organization. And she says, once I was able to finally demonstrate it through the heat map, frankly, literally sitting down with our executive team and now showing them this heat map, for the first time, they were able to actually see what I was talking about, not just from my personal sentiment, but there it is in hard data in numbers. The language of business is numbers. So what we needed to do was to deliver numbers surrounding every aspect of the experience that their people are having so that you can know where and what you need to address. So that was an amazing thing that she mentioned to me, was just the ability to raise that level. The other thing I've heard is that we have organizations that are now taking this data, and just like with their leadership, not only do they have the financial aspects that they're accountable for, but now for the very first time, they're able to now take their culture, because we're delivering numbers towards people and culture. Well, those are now sitting right next to the financial reporting, and they're being held accountable for that equally within the organization. Those are the types of things that we're seeing, that's how people and organizations are leveraging this, is to recognize, oh, well, now that we can see it and track it, now for the first time, we have the ability to actually hold people accountable for it. Because until then, how do you hold people accountable for culture if you don't, again, have a way to quantify it or identify it? So anyways, I don't know, are there any questions, anything? I thought I would pause a little bit as we go along. I get kind of excited in talking about this, as hopefully you can see.
You are definitely exciting, and the tool is exciting as well. We don't have any other questions. Greg
Okay.
certainly as shall we say, agreed with you on you can't agree on the quantification of it, but you can quantify a culture. So you've got a cohort out there. I do have a quick
Right.
question from myself, Robert, and that is, so I'm looking at your chart here, and I think one of the key things that you mentioned earlier, and I think this is really key, the idea you've got real-time data. I have seen organizations focus on the wrong thing, not because it's the wrong thing, but it's the wrong thing at that moment. So maybe you could give us a little more insight to what your clients are seeing in this idea of the real-time perspective. If I make a small move, am I going to see a positive or negative? Maybe I concentrated overly much on one thing and not enough on the right. Just give me a feel, because I think that's what I'm seeing at the essence of this, is that real-time data is a way of judging every move you're making quickly.
That's exactly right. It's so amazing to me, because obviously, when we see dips in forecasts or anything like that, I always go back, because I'm so conditioned to the regular financials that I look at within an organization, right?
Yep.
That's exactly those same insights. That's what you're able to get here. Are we able to predict? Absolutely. Can we watch the trends and now start predicting? Look, we were up here at an 85 in this team. We hired this new manager. We implemented him in the team. Now, 2 months later, we're down at a 65 for their team scores, and we've got all these issues going on. Well, I can help. Obviously, I start to predict. My predictive analysis and the AI within the tool now starts to say, hey, you're likely to start losing people and retention issues and all of this because I have real-time data. That real-time data allows you to make actual decisions versus everything that we've been conditioned to when it comes to people and culture is off of some survey that was, some amount of time, 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Business does not work like that anymore. We can't take data surrounding our people, their experience. Could you imagine doing a an annual survey 12 months ago? Look what happened in the last 12 months. That would be completely irrelevant.
Exactly.
And how would I would ask you this question, I guess, is how would your experience guiding your company be different if you had this level of data and insight from your people on a daily basis?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, is that you don't have to look at these. We fight fires in arrears. Let's go from reactive to proactive by getting the data and the insights we need to allow us to do that. Let's nip things in the bud versus having them become these huge issues that we have to fight later. There was a company we just talked to, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, we just recognized we hadn't done anything in a long time. We did a diversity, equity, and inclusion survey, and yeah, we pretty much got crushed in it. So they hadn't been listening to their people. Now they're trying to figure out what to do. Well, we're saying, well, you could take a traditional survey approach, but again, that was their insight on that one day. What you need is the ability to guide you forward. So anyways,
No,
I'll continue.
well,
I'll
no,
continue.
and I think you do have a couple of, I won't say questions, but certainly comments, and Alexis is certainly doing a great job of answering them out here, which is great. But, I mean, you've got folks asking, this idea, can I do before and after trending? You just explained that we can do that, and it's really kind of, I did this, I remember what it looked like, and I'm now seeing that movement, if you will, that new metric that shows I'm maybe on the right track. Or what happens if
Yeah.
I, kind of tweak this again a little bit further? Oh, wow,
See,
that was not a good move.
exactly. That's the whole point. So that's another traditional methodology, and I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm just saying if you listen to us today, hopefully we share with you some ideas about maybe some new ideas. And that
Mhm.
is that most organizations, once you've identified something, then they take a survey before and they take a survey at the end. While that's helpful, what that does to me, from my perspective, is that, well, if I could actually learn along the way how we're doing, then I can make sure when we get to the end that we've actually accomplished what we were looking for. I can iterate throughout the process to make sure that we get there. So that's one component. How much better would it be to know and understand the impact and what's going right and what's going wrong with that initiative all the way through it versus just finding it out at the end, especially if we miss the mark. And
Yeah.
that's what, unfortunately, many times we do in an organization. We miss the mark. We address the wrong problems. We solve the wrong things because we don't actually have really good insight to help us understand what the real problems are. And we think we do, and we take actions on those, and then we miss. Why do so many initiatives fail? Well, we'll help you to see some components of how we change that whole process. But the last thing I wanted to mention on that was just that if I can measure throughout the experience, I can impact it. But the other thing is that long term, now how do you make it stick? That is probably the biggest problem, is that yes, I may have gone through something, created an initiative, went through the process, got to the other end, and now, of course, right after I survey, people are like, oh yeah, this worked, this is great. But what happened to that 6 months later?
Yep, there we go. I like it.
Right?
Yep.
If you don't have a way to then continue to quantify it, then what happens is we do so many things. And this was one of my biggest mistakes that I had to learn in my experience, was that if you don't have a systematic way to implement these things, then they always fall off. And if I don't have a way to measure it, that's why we call this the systematic process, right? To get your business results, is because that's one of the core things I've learned in business is if you don't have a system and don't systematize this, then it just becomes the flavor of the day. And that's what we're trying to change. So anyways.
So I don't know if you mentioned that. My apologies if you did, but your mechanism is not just a laptop, but that of certainly the mobile situation and a very quick turnaround on some of the stuff. I don't know if you touched upon that yet or not.
Yeah, so again, we try to meet them wherever they are. Text has been phenomenal because everybody has this device in their hand, right? It's
Mhm.
so easy. And because we didn't develop an app, just sending a simple text, that is amazingly easy. Now, yes, are there regulations? You have to have people opt in. Yes, there's a process to go. But what we found is that the majority of people within an organization, that's what they want. They're opting in. The last company we brought on, I think, had 95% of their people say, yeah, absolutely. I prefer it via text. But that being said, if you use Slack or even a login software from your time clock, or I don't care what it is, as long as it's the easiest thing for your people to do. That's what we care about. What's super easy so that we can get that consistent engagement. So does that help?
It doesn't, and Bruce has asked a very similar perspective. He says, everybody's inundated with the communication. So what is it? What's in it for the employee to answer these questions? What amount of data do you need to justify insights? Maybe not just the penetration, but maybe kind of I'll associate with that your ability to break down groups, departments, whatever the case may be. It sounds like you're going to need a hookup for an HRMS or an HRIS system sitting feeding this, even though you have the opt-in feature. Can I do this standalone completely?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we don't gather insights from their HRIS typically. Now, if they do have a communication tool in there and maybe in their specific HRIS platform, this is where we message and we do all kinds of things, then great. That may be a great place for us to interact and have those conversations. Again, we don't really care. We're agnostic as to where they are, as long as it's the easiest for that individual. And of course, it doesn't have to be the same. Maybe people working in the corporate office use Slack. Great, let's use that. People out here that are remote, drivers and out on their deskless experience, let's use text. It's any combination. The whole goal, make it simple and easy.
Very cool. Well, let me
And
not hold you up. We're at the halfway
yeah.
mark and we're looking good. So
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah. So keep me
no,
rolling.
that's
Don't
all
let
right.
me just get stuck. But so the data is one part, right? So now these numbers are really helpful, but that's just magic number one. The ultimate magic for this and where we really changed the game was that, okay, so this team, for example, on their onboarding processes, they're really struggling. Well, knowing that they're struggling is the first step, but the most important thing to know is, well, why? What's happening? What's causing it? What's the problem that we're struggling with? Or in these other areas, hey, look, why is this other team, Department 50, why are they doing so well? They've got almost 100%, everybody loving that experience. So what's the difference? And that's where we took a conversations, not surveys approach. And what that means to us is that we actually respond on the other end. And we don't respond with a bot. Even though I believe in every AI technology and it helps us to do predictive analysis and sentiment analysis, all kinds of crazy things in our platform. We are a people-focused organization. And it's a personal belief that I didn't want to be sharing, oh, well, yeah, here, provide feedback, and then we'll have you talk to a bot on the other end. That does not tell them, that does not share with them that this is a personal, that's not a human experience, frankly. And that's why we have people on the other end that actually respond. And we engage in these anonymous conversations, because now what I need to tell you is, what is the why behind the numbers? Why are in order, I go back to surveys again. Traditional process, I send out a survey. Well, then it comes back, gives me some high level feedback. What do I have to do next? I have to sit down with people in focus groups or go to the next step because it's just gave me high level insight. I need to know how they actually think and feel. We eliminated that whole thing because we go straight to and created an individual experience, the ability to have a private one-on-one conversation where our people at Olumo take the heavy lifting off of, because it's very difficult for HR. They have so many other things going on. They can't be engaging with this on, every single conversation. We do all of that for them. But it's in these conversations, that's where we get the why behind the numbers. 4, 5, 6 levels deep, through text, through email, whatever it may be, we're having a conversation so that we can now understand why that's happening and the experience that's going there. And you can see here, if you can see the screen okay, like we protect anonymity. That's our number one right. We have to protect that. But at the same time, we also need to provide the organization with accurate data as to where this is coming from. So what we do is we limit to a subset of 5. So for example, in this, there are at least 5 people in this location. There's at least 5 millennials in this, and there's at least 5 females in this. But you'll notice I'm absent. I don't see the exact team that this is coming from because there's not at least 5 females on that team. So we limit that, we protect it, but at the same time, I can go through and sort by all kinds of demographics and slice the data and look at, well, here's how we're doing as a whole, but how are we doing with men versus women? How are we doing with, Gen Z versus traditionalists? How are we doing with this or that, right? Now I can start to slice that data. But this is probably the most important thing that we do that is so different that no other solution that I've seen on the market even does, is to have these conversations, and it's the conversations that deliver the insight. So I'm intrigued to see if there was any thoughts or questions surrounding that.
I think they're absorbing it, Robert. I think that it is
Okay.
truly a very distinct,
Mind blown.
different. Yep, exactly. Thank you very much. Again, from the standpoint, Greg had asked the question, if you're not hooking up to the an HRMS, a very simplistic implementation question, how much information must a person put in, and
Oh,
how do you
sorry.
validate
I
that?
didn't clarify that very well. So yes, we do. You can download through a CSV, and yes, it could be totally standalone,
Okay,
but that's not our recommended way. What I was trying to say is that I don't need that for feeding the daily insights,
right,
but we absolutely recommend to connect to your HRIS so that we're not having to manage adding people in and out of the platform. So yeah, we have APIs, and we just connect straight to the HRIS platform so that as you onboard or exit people, all of that triggers everything automatically within the platform. The other quick note is that, of course, as people are onboarded into the company, we don't start asking them their regular questions because they're not prepared to start talking about culture the first day they show up on the job.
right.
But we have a whole onboarding and life cycle components where we start them with questions about, hey, how was your first day on the job? How was your experience in getting hired? How was, 10 days later, 30 days later? We ask them a different set of questions and then eventually fold them into the regular questions once they're, really onboarded. So just a note on that, technically, kind of how that works.
Right. So I
Yeah.
guarantee you got
Okay,
you got
please.
to the heart of one of our folks out here who asked, Bruce, who said, so how many analysts do you have providing the conversations, and what are their backgrounds? In other words, your secret sauce.
Yeah, of course, the secret sauce, and I'm going to defer that slightly because I am going to cover that in just a second, and
Absolutely
that's
fine.
the only reason. So I think that's a
Yep.
great question, and I promise I'll come back to that to show you because it's one of our greatest strengths. So
Good.
the next phase that we've seen with organizations is now you have this data, you have all of this, of course, and you know, in the engage part, that's all about listening and listening to understand. But now that we've listened, now it's time to start taking action. And one of the things that we help organizations to do is to do that through a co-creative process. Many organizations miss the opportunity. We talk about engagement. hey, let's create employee engagement, right? But the way you create that is by engaging them. One of the great ways, of course, is we start having these individual conversations. You would not believe, like, the conversations would melt your heart. Whereas it's an honor for me to be able to see these conversations on the platform and to be able to see, hey, thank you so much. I feel heard. I feel valued. You know, thank you so much. There was a great one where, since deploying the platform, my manager is actually becoming the manager I always hoped that they would be. Bottom line, once we started showing accountability and they recognized that they were actually going to be accountable for it, of course, it changes the behaviors. I love that quote by, why am I blanking on it? Peter Drucker, sorry. What gets measured gets managed, right?
Right.
When that happens, that simply by doing that and putting in the platform and making it visual to where people can see it, it immediately has an impact on the organization. Then long term, now we're starting to take these actions. And through this cycle, what we do is we help, again, organizations to co-create solutions to their problems. Don't miss the opportunity to involve your people in solving the problems as part of that process. So often we just go and say, oh, well, now we know what the problem is, let's go fix it. But if we lose the opportunity to involve them in the solution, we lose the opportunity to create the engagement, their buy-in, the alignment, all of these different core components. So that's another part of the software that we've designed in to help organizations facilitate that within the software. Then, of course, long term, now we need to be able to track it, the needles, and through all kinds of different ways of looking at and exploring the data and the insights. But again, the numbers are really good to help me know where to go, but then the conversations let me know why, and then we're able to take this process. And it's a systematic process. Then we do it again, right? It's an iterative, we're iterating piece by piece, improving the organization on an ongoing basis based on having real-time actionable insights. Now, what I mean by real-time, some people get nervous about that. They're like, well, what am I going to do if I'm getting information every single day? And we help them to recognize, look, we're going to be looking for trends. You don't have to respond to every little comment and everything. That's our job. That's what we're doing. And then what we do is we help you, right? We're with you every step of the way. Our goal, as our stated goal as a company, is to help you to become an employer of choice by becoming a certified human experience organization where we help provide the recognition. You may have seen some of our little logos, but we help you to get the recognition you deserve for taking those steps and actions. We have by far, the most I was going to say restrictive, but that's totally the wrong word. But bottom line, we don't give our awards away. You earn them. And you earn your certification by becoming that organization. And what we do is we help you all the way along. In order to become a certified human experience at work provider, it gives our teams a specific goal of what we're working to do and what we're working to help you to accomplish. So we have two different teams that really are involved with your organization. We have our success team, and this is what the comment was about a moment ago. And our success managers are trained to have these conversations with your people, and they're focusing on listening to understand. Again, we're not trying to solve problems in that specific aspect. We're just trying to listen. I use it like the conversation I have with my wife. I'm a fixer. I try to fix things. We have a conversation. She's like, stop fixing my problems. Just listen. That's what we do. And that's what the success team really focuses on. In addition to that, though, we've seen that it's extremely helpful for organizations to have a strategic advisor that also comes in. And this is included as part of our service. Every one of our competitors out there in the market, if you want some strategic advisor or somebody to help you now take or understand or identify actions or things like that, well, you're going to now sign some big contract or consulting or something like that. We provide this as part of our service. Our whole goal is to help use the data, understand it, and then help you to align with that and take actions that help you to improve it. And that's what our teams do. They work hand in hand with you. Our success team and our strategic advisors work hand in hand with you to make sure that we're helping you and guiding you at every step of the way, knowing, okay, what are the things, what are the triggers, what are the actions, where should we be focusing on? Again, we try to take all of that heavy lifting so that you don't have to spend hours and hours diving into the data. That's what we do for you. We look at the data, we look at the trends, we understand what's there, and then we sit down and very quickly in an executive fashion, deliver the insights and the data to you and help you strategize surrounding how to affect it. That's one of our greatest strengths. The other thing that we're doing, and this is for if there are HR consultants and business consultants that are on this call or having, with us on the conversation, we're building a marketplace because oftentimes we do, and we have drawn a very specific line in the sand strategically for this. Let's say, for example, that you identify, hey, look, we're really struggling with leadership and it really looks like we need to address this through some leadership training. Well, Olumo doesn't provide that training. We don't do that, but I will connect you with an amazing person or organization, an HR consultant, a business consultant, a training provider that can help you. And so we're building a marketplace for our clients that allow them to get additional access to all the other things that they need within the platform, or not within the platform, sorry, all of the other resources that they need. And so we're building these strategic alliances. We also help our HR and consulting partners by, frankly, delivering this product for free as an assessment for their clients. So they can walk in the door, say, look, you would like me to do some leadership training, that's great, but why don't we do this assessment and let's understand where your organization is, and based on all of this amazing data and insight that we're going to give you, I'll be able to help you best understand within the organization where and how we should focus my efforts. So there's some things there, and I won't get too deep into that because I really want to actually hop into the platform and I'm running out of time. Because I really do. I love this, as you can tell.
So Robert,
Bottom,
let me extend
please.
something very quickly. And this
Okay.
this crowd knows that we can go over the hour if people wish to stay, and I'm very happy to keep that going. And then we'll just keep the recording going. So don't worry too much about. I want to say about the time. Let's say maybe another 15 minutes over the time to do that. But if you have to leave again, I'll just say up early. Thank you for all of you joining, and we'll just keep on rolling, Robert. I will say,
Absolutely. Okay.
what you showed in that last slide is an extremely growing trend. I'm not seeing it very much in the vendor world, but I will say you have a platform, you have experts who are part of the consulting, if you will, which you do internally, and you are creating a marketplace. And I think that is an extremely intelligent and probably a very trendy thing. You're leading the way because that's where I think we're going.
Well, we looked at it and we're like, either we have to be the world's most sophisticated training and education partner, and we're like, that makes no sense. If we do that, we'll totally lose our focus. So
Yep.
we decided, look, we're the tool. Think of us as the tool. And we're the tool to help you get to this, to create that human experience at work and to help your organization become that employer of choice and to do all of those things. But of course, what we need is strategic partnerships with experts across all of their different fields. If you're struggling with diversity, equity, inclusion, and you're really looking, now I have the data to show you where, well, now tactically, you can bring in somebody that can tactically take that data and execute the right and the proper strategy surrounding it.
Exactly.
I was talking to some of my consulting partners and they're like, yeah, one of the biggest struggles we have, I told that story in the beginning, but that's a true story. There's an organization with 500,000 people that received 2,000 comments. And that's how they're trying to build their entire strategy is off of like the fraction of a percent of actual insight from their people. That's what I'm talking about. That's what we're working to change. Of course, our ROIs, I'll try to get to this piece because the ROIs associated with this are dramatic. And, cost of retention, cost of disengagement. But I'll tell you one of the surprising ones for me. We have one of the categories in the platform is our risk mitigation platform. And I share with organizations all the time that, once you've built this, now you need to protect it, right? You've spent all this time and work and effort to build this amazing experience. Your people love working, you're attracting people to your organization, and then along comes some sexual harassment lawsuit or something like that that destroys everything you've been working on for so long to build. Well, that's what our risk mitigation campaign does. It's a proactive approach to assess, sexual harassment, bullying, fraud, carelessness, cybercrimes, retaliation, all these different things. Any type of discrimination, all of those things, we're asking questions to proactively understand. And I'm telling you, it works. We had one of our clients that came on, they're a hotel property manager. One of their locations, we received 3 different reports from their from staff in that hotel that the maintenance individual in that hotel was sexually harassing people. We immediately were able to communicate that to their HR team. Their HR team then went and did their investigation and solved the problem. That issue could have crushed that organization. And issue after, I could tell stories for days about all of these different types of things. But that's what I mean by having real-time live actionable insight, proactively helping you to address all of these things going on in the organization. So yeah, we're going to find problems. Yes, we're also going to help you identify where you're doing great and you need to do more of that, right? How to duplicate that within other teams and other areas. It's so fun to help these organizations for the first time to really have a clear understanding. Because the last thing I'll show, and then I'll hop over here I want to hop to the actual platform now, but is that I call it leadership fog. And the larger the organization, the more distributed, the more difficult it is for senior management to truly understand the experience and what's happening. Once you can make the right choices and decisions. But oftentimes, that leadership bubble, I call it leadership fog, as I said, but the ability to hear from the front lines of the organization. One last story. I love stories. I had a CEO of another, not the same hospitality company, but another hospitality company, I share this because I was shocked. I'm like, these guys are getting crushed right now. How are they spending money on this to implement this platform? And I called up the CEO and I said essentially that same question, why did you choose to prioritize this? And what he said to me was, because I needed to know what's happening at the front lines of the organization. If I'm going to guide us through this process, then what I need right now is really good insight, because I need to make the right choices and decisions to guide this organization. And I can't frankly do that. He said, look, I know I don't get all of the right insight from everywhere. And I can't travel to the places. I can't do all the things where I used to try to get that insight. I need a way to understand and listen directly to the front lines of the organization. That CEO has done amazing things, because as he started to see and gather the insights and the feedback, another feature in the platform over here is this little polls where I can go out and ask, on the fly polls. So in general, the system is automated. You turn on the different experiences that you're looking to measure and quantify, and then it's just automated, right? It just runs. But what he did was he launched off and gathered some insight, recognized several different areas, and then he started communicating directly with the entire organization, because he's like, look, half the time people don't see what I say because I send it in email. Now I have this text methodology. I can actually help connect with the front lines of the organization. So he started sending these texts about different things that they would see and saying, hey, thank you for the feedback. We're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And we're working on this now. And by doing that, it just created this amazing experience within the organization where, of course, now that people know that the CEO is listening, they're engaging with us like crazy. And that's another great thing is we typically see between, I think the very lowest on the platform right now is 72% engagement up in the 90s with the platform. So really high, really amazing. But this is an example I'm showing you here of like one of the polls. So this is a common one, right? Well, in a post-COVID world, how often would you like to work remote? This is one of our clients that asked that question. And they send it off, and here's all the responses, and they were able to get immediate insight. I share with companies all the time, don't guess, just ask. If you have a question like, well, what should we do? And what do you think people are going to want to do? Well, don't guess, just ask. Fire up a poll, ask it in the meeting. And in the same meeting you're sitting in, 10 minutes later, you're going to have all kinds of amazing insight based on that because we're doing it so quickly via text. So anyways, I can hop you through a few of the things here within the platform to kind of show you how it works and the actual software. Any other thoughts or questions that have come in that I should address?
Not at this time. We're looking good.
Okay, I'll keep rolling. So this is the homepage of the software, and what you're seeing here, let me see if I can make it maybe a little bit larger for you here. This Olumo score, we like to think of it kind of like your FICO score, where what it does is it takes all of the different aspects, there's 60 plus different unique aspects of the organization that we can quantify. And so in here, this is a cumulative score helping you understand the overall health. So if you want to see one number and track that, you can. You'll also notice under here that this is key and critical because, well, let me state it this way. You can create all of your own custom metrics. And what I want you to know, of course, is that any organization can say, hey, here's the things that I want to track and quantify. Maybe it's your values or different things within the organization. I can put a needle on anything. So you tell me what you want to track and we'll build a needle. So you can create custom questions, custom campaigns, all that's possible. But the reason why we also have a lot of these that are just preset and ready to go, we saw a lot of organizations get stuck there. And so we went and worked with organizational psychologists to design all of the different question sets, and we have those set and ready to go. So literally you can plug us into your HRIS, let your people know what's happening, and press go. 24 hours later, we could launch the whole platform. There's nothing that you really have to do to launch the platform. It's that simple. But that being said, because these then are question sets that are going across multiple organizations, we have the ability to benchmark. So you can see, and I logged into this company because it's one of our top performing organizations on the platform, where you can see they've got an amazing ENPS, your employee net promoter score, 0 detractors in this organization. They've got an amazing 70 currently. You would be shocked, by the way, when people do ENPS scores, you would be shocked that if you took it one day and took it the next day, you would get a completely different score. It's so amazing to watch how that data starts to flow because, of course, people have a different experience today than they had yesterday. But in here, that benchmark, so look, they're 10 above the average Olumo client. And so we help to organize based on your organizational size and your industry to help you know, well, how are you doing in these areas? Is an 86 good? Yeah, it's fantastic. It's way above other organizations that are out there. And so every single metric that we have is benchmarked. Underneath that primary Olumo score, these are the primary categories. So if you want to measure alignment, when COVID came out, of course, we wanted to put a needle on that, right? So we wanted to understand the experience that people were having. So if I hop into this COVID campaign, you can see how they've been trending, where they sit, where things are. But then here's what we're actually measuring. How do you feel like leadership is done during COVID? How are you personally doing, your personal well-being? Do you feel like we're communicating well with you during the process? How do you feel like our customers are doing? How has this affected our company and culture? Do you have, of course, the systems and technologies you need to be successful? And then each of these, of course, every one of those scores you can see is benchmarked across other organizations to help you to understand. So what an organization does is they choose the experience that they want to turn on. And these are all the primary experiences. They don't currently have mental health turned on, but they do have well-being, remote workplaces, all these different aspects of what you're looking to try to track. And then within each of those are the sub-metrics that I showed you. Well, those then generate these reports, right? Based on the organization, showing me by different teams and departments. And I can look at it based on team, department, location, or any type of custom group. But then I also love to come up here and turn on the different filters and say, okay, well, let's look at this team. Let's look at this group. Let's look at these different demographics. And based on the data sets that you have available, whatever we can pull out of your HRIS platform will then allow you to sort based on all of that different type of data. Now we have the numbers, we're understanding that, hey, look, the sales team doesn't think we're doing great with customers. That's interesting. Well, let's now hop over here to engage, and engage is where these conversations are happening. And this is where the back and forth, conversations about what's going on within the organization, how they're feeling, and our ability to go back and forth with them, engaging in these responses and conversations to understand their perspective and really understand what's happening. It's such an amazing thing as we do this because people really feel valued and they feel heard and listened to, and that there's finally a safe place where they can communicate these things. That's the power that we're really delivering here in the platform. Then from there, so I'm kind of walking you through our LEAP process. We listened, we engaged, right? Now it's time, let's fire off an initiative. But again, it's a co-creative process. We're helping you to not just push those initiatives out, but before you do that, we really like the measure twice, cut once strategy. Let's go out. Yes, maybe we pull together a team. Maybe we work and create some ideas surrounding what we want or think we should do. But before we do it, let's publish it. Let's push it out. Let's gather feedback on what we're proposing versus, that's the first step. Let's make the right action and take the right action. So this helps to gather feedback surrounding the actions you're looking to take so that you make sure you're taking the right ones. But again, the key, we're pulling people into the process. We're involving them. We're creating the engagement. We're creating the alignment, and bottom line, their collective, their commitment to it, right? All of those things are coming into the platform. So anyways, that's, I will pause. I will, this is really, I can show all kinds of different things, but at this point, I hope that you can see that as an organization, we really have taken a very strategic approach, not to just be a data provider. Do I think we do that better than any organization out there? I haven't seen anything that comes close to the level, the frequency, the ability, and the actual ability to dive down to the root causes. I haven't seen anything that can deliver that like we do. But I think if you ask me, that's step one. But step two is really then getting the help that they need to guide them through the actions and to take those. And then, of course, the resources, in addition to that, the resources needed. But bottom line, we are your partner. We are here to partner with you and help you through that process to become the employer of choice. And to do that, we help you to create the human experience at work. So I will now pause and just take questions. So thank you so much for being
Robert,
willing to
did a
spend some time with
marvelous
us.
job. Absolutely marvelous. In fact, you spurred me to kind of pose to the audience here. I think I'd like to ask you to come back. Let's give it another month or so down there. Let's let our folks kind of understand and maybe mull over what they just saw in the presentation. We'll certainly put this up on the YouTube channel. But my feeling is, let's bring you back and let's do some deeper dives with maybe some use cases of other clients, kind of, I would even ask to bring them with you.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
the value of what you've shown us in the demonstration, and certainly the ROI, is an amazing perspective. But I love the process and the practicality of what you're doing and how your clients are reacting to both your platform, your methodology, your consulting behind it, the whole 9 yards. I think if we could bring you to the table with maybe a couple of your clients to kind of speak to the actual reality of it. And your demo was wonderful, and like everything else, it sounds really good. I'd love to hear that practical experience because you've now shown us something we did not know existed. Now we have a new set of thinking. So if you don't mind, I'll ask you and Alexis to come back. We'll set up a date.
We'd
Folks,
love to do that.
think a lot
Absolutely.
about what this is. Bring your management, which I think is the first place to go. Touch it. Bring the management to the table, bring your friends to the table, and certainly I'm going to bring IREM to the table because I think they need to see this as well as members. You will see that coming through. And look for us to have Olumo right back to us, let's say another month or so out here. So
Yeah, and I think maybe in closing, I would also share that within an organization, one of the things that I love to do is we provide that assessment for free, right? So we will come into your organization, launch the entire platform, run it for 2 weeks, let you see the data,
yeah,
let you see the impact, let you understand, and at worst case, you'll have the best understanding of your organization you've ever had. But it's something so new that I found that that's very, very helpful for organizations because you've never had anything like this. You don't really know what that is. What is the value of that? And that's one of the things that we're very open. And so if anybody would love to take us up on that, I just wanted to extend that as an offer that we would be happy
yep,
to share the platform with you completely for free, just to
absolutely.
show you exactly how it works. So
And Alexis has put out your calendar invites so that people see that, and I'm going to make sure this goes out there as well with the chat. I will say this, having been in this business a long time, new is always scary. And
yes,
so I think your offer is extremely generous, and I think that I would hope that some of this audience, being as technically savvy as they are, would take you up on it. Sometimes it's the hardest thing in the world, though. I'm in the trenches somewhere, and I want to have my company adopt this. It's going up the chain that scares them. What's interesting is I think that's exactly, are we open to new ideas from our employees? That's a great question. So anyway, I love
absolutely.
what you did. I have to compliment you. This is one of the best ones we've had in quite some time, and I appreciate it very, very much that you and Alexis are taking the time to show us the product. So
Well,
cool.
thank you, and thank you to everyone out there. We appreciate and thank you for your time and efforts there. We're very appreciative and grateful. So
Well,
thank you
we'll
so
be
much.
seeing you soon, so don't go too far, right? All righty. Everyone stay well. I'll talk to you soon. We'll have another one next Thursday. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.